The sun crawled like a wounded animal across the sky, casting long shadows over the mountains of discarded technology. Jack Riley's fingers traced the intricate pathways of a circuit board, salvaged from what most would consider a worthless heap of electronic debris. Sweat beaded on his forehead, cutting clean lines through the layer of dust and grime that seemed permanently etched into his skin. Around him, the global Scrapheap stretched for kilometers, a testament to humanity's wasteful past and uncertain future. Massive processing towers sorted endless streams of electronic components, their mechanical arms moving with a rhythmic precision that contrasted sharply with the chaotic landscape. Jack's workshop stood as an island of controlled chaos amidst this sea of forgotten technology. He adjusted the neural interface wrapped around his left temple, a custom-built device cobbled together from at least 7 different communication systems. Most would call it impossible. Jack called it Tuesday. The scanner beside him, a device he personally reconstructed from the remains of 3 different military-grade communication interceptors, suddenly erupted in a burst of encrypted data. Most people would have dismissed the strange signal as nothing more than electronic noise. But Jack Rayleigh was not most people. His fingers danced across the holographic interface, filtering and parsing the transmission. Years of working with broken technology had given him an almost supernatural ability to see patterns where others saw only static. Something about this signal was different. It wasn't just random noise. It was structured, purposeful, and definitely not of human origin. "Computer," he called out, his voice rough from years of breathing metallic dust. "Run pattern analysis on the recent signal." The workshop's eye, a cobbled-together system Jack had personally rebuilt from the corpses of 3 different research computers, flickered to life. Holographic displays erupted around him, showing complex mathematical models and linguistic algorithms that would have made most cryptographers weep. Jack's workshop was more than just a workspace. It was a sanctuary of human potential, a place where broken things found new purpose. Shelves lined with meticulously organized components told stories of resurrection. Circuit boards brought back from the dead, communication systems rebuilt from fragments, entire computer networks constructed from what others would have thrown away. A notification blinked urgently on one of the screens. The signal wasn't just encrypted, it was encrypted using a communication protocol that didn't match any known human or terrestrial standard. Jack felt a familiar rush of excitement, the same feeling he'd experienced countless times when discovering something truly unique. Outside, the Scrapheap continued its endless dance. Massive sorting machines moved mountains of electronic waste, searching for recyclable materials. But Jack knew the real treasure wasn't in the metals or the rare earth elements. The real value lay in the potential, the ability to see beyond what something was and imagine what it could become. His personal history was etched into every corner of the workshop. Photos of past projects lined the walls. Communication systems rebuilt from military surplus, computer networks constructed from educational hardware discarded by schools, power systems cobbled together from industrial waste. Each image was a testament to his core belief. Nothing was truly broken, only waiting to be reimagined. The scanner continued its frantic analysis. Jack knew he was onto something significant. The signal's complexity suggested an intelligence far beyond current human communication technologies. Its encrypted layers were like an intricate puzzle, each decrypted fragment revealing more questions than answers. A notification popped up, causing Jack to lean forward. The signal's origin point was calculated, and it wasn't from anywhere on Earth. Not from any satellite, not from any known human communication network. Something out there was trying to communicate, and Jack Rayleigh was about to listen. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, adjusting filters, running cross-referencing algorithms, pushing the limits of his custom-built systems. Years of working in the global Scrapheaps had taught him one fundamental truth: potential exists everywhere, if you're willing to look close enough. The workshop hummed with anticipation. Outside, the mountains of electronic waste continued their silent vigil, holding secrets waiting to be discovered. Jack Rayleigh stood at the precipice of something extraordinary, and he was ready to dive in. The decoded transmission sat like a weight of inevitability on Jack's primary display. Each line of data painted a picture more terrifying than the last, a mathematical equation of extinction that defied human comprehension. The Krelvax didn't just plan to conquer. They calculated total elimination with the same detached precision one might use to solve a simple arithmetic problem. Jack's fingers traced the holographic projection, pulling apart layers of encrypted data that most intelligence agencies would have deemed incomprehensible. Global communication networks had gone silent weeks ago, but he understood why now. The transmission wasn't just a message, it was a detailed operational blueprint of humanity's systematic destruction. "This is beyond war," he muttered, speaking to the empty workshop. "This is computational genocide." The global government's response had been predictably catastrophic. Panic had transformed into a collective paralysis. Military leadership had already begun negotiating surrender terms, viewing resistance as a mathematical impossibility. Jack knew better. Mathematics was just another language, and languages could be understood, manipulated, rewritten. He pulled up historical records of previous Krelvax conquests. Each civilization they had encountered followed the same pattern: initial contact, rapid technological assessment, then complete systemic elimination. Entire species reduced to mathematical variables, their existence calculated and then erased with cold, logical precision. But something in the transmission caught Jack's eye. A subtle irregularity, a microscopic imperfection in what appeared to be a perfect computational model. Most would have overlooked it. Jack saw an opportunity. The workshop's environmental systems hummed quietly, recycling air through filters Jack had personally designed. Each component around him told a story of transformation. Broken things finding new purpose, discarded technologies reborn through imagination and skill. He began cross-referencing the alien transmission with decades of abandoned military research. Forgotten prototypes, experimental communication systems, quantum computing projects that had been dismissed as failures. Each became a potential weapon against an enemy that believed itself unbeatable. A notification blinked on his secondary screen. One of his automated search algorithms had found something interesting in a database of rejected military research. Jack leaned closer, his breath catching in his throat. The project had been abandoned 15 years ago, a theoretical framework for adaptive computational systems. The original researchers had been laughed out of their academic positions, their work deemed mathematically impossible. But Jack saw something different. He saw potential. Outside, the mountains of electronic waste seemed to watch, silent witnesses to humanity's last chance. Jack's communication network, a cobbled-together system of intercepted satellite feeds, underground communication lines, and custom-built signal boosters, began picking up fragmented reports from around the world. Military installations going dark, communication networks collapsing, governments surrendering without a fight. But not everyone was giving up. He pulled up a series of encrypted messages from a network of underground researchers, engineers, and military personnel who refused to accept defeat. Scattered across the globe, they were gathering, sharing information, looking for any possible way to resist. The Krelvax transmission contained more than just a declaration of war. It was a comprehensive analysis of human technological capabilities, or what they perceived as our limitations. Each line of data revealed their fundamental misunderstanding of human potential. Jack understood something the Krelvax did not. Humanity's greatest strength had never been its technology. It was the ability to reimagine, to transform, to see potential where others saw only failure. He began compiling a database, connecting seemingly unrelated pieces of technological research, a rejected quantum computing prototype, an abandoned nanotechnology experiment, a failed military communication system. Individually, they were nothing. Together, they might become something extraordinary. The workshop's lights flickered, a reminder of the precarious state of global infrastructure. But Jack Rayleigh wasn't thinking about survival. He was thinking about resistance, about transformation, about turning the Scrapheap of human technology into humanity's most unexpected weapon. His fingers moved across the holographic interface, a symphony of possibility taking shape with each calculated keystroke. The Krellvax believed they had humanity mapped, calculated, ready for elimination. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The first team member arrived on a rainy Tuesday, carried by a modified cargo drone that looked like it had survived 3 apocalypses. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stumbled out of the vehicle, her prosthetic leg, a masterpiece of mismatched technological components, leaving intricate patterns in the mud outside Jack's workshop. "I heard you're doing something crazy," she announced, dropping a massive case filled with rejected medical research prototypes. "And I'm exactly the kind of crazy you need." Jack knew her reputation. Once a leading biomedical engineer, Rodriguez had been ostracized for her radical theories on adaptive biological systems. Her work had been considered too experimental, too wild. Exactly the kind of thinking they would need to survive. The next arrival was less subtle. Marcus Green, a former Special Forces tactical analyst, rolled up in a vehicle constructed entirely from recycled military hardware. His entrance was punctuated by the distinctive sound of repurposed communication equipment crackling to life. "I don't do lost causes," Marcus declared, unloading a series of encrypted hard drives. "But this might be interesting." By sunset, the team had expanded. Kimiko Nakamura arrived, a quantum computing specialist who had been working in complete isolation since her groundbreaking research was dismissed by mainstream scientific communities. Her fingers never stopped moving, constantly recalibrating equipment, seeing connections where others saw only chaos. Their makeshift laboratory was a testament to human improvisation. Shipping containers welded together, powered by a fusion generator cobbled from experimental power research. Communication systems built from the bones of discarded military and educational hardware. Each team member brought something unique, a fragment of potential that, when combined, might just become something extraordinary. "We're not just building a weapon," Jack explained during their first formal meeting. The team gathered around a holographic display showing the fragmented Krellvax transmission. "We're building a system of pure adaptation." Belina leaned forward, her prosthetic leg's internal mechanisms whirring softly. "Adaptive how? Most computational systems have fundamental limitations." Jack pulled up a series of rejected research projects. "We're not looking at traditional computing. We're looking at something that can learn, transform, and rebuild itself faster than any pre-programmed system." Marcus studied the display, his tactical mind already running potential scenarios. "You're talking about a living weapon, something that doesn't just respond to threats, but anticipates and transforms before the threat even materializes." Kimiko's fingers danced across a custom-built interface. "Theoretically impossible," she muttered. Then, with a slight smile, "which means we might actually have a chance." Their first prototype was nothing short of miraculous, and completely unstable, a computational matrix that could theoretically reshape itself at the molecular level, drawing power and information from seemingly random technological components. It was less a weapon and more an organism of pure potential. "Each failure is just another data point," Jack would repeat, a mantra that kept the team moving forward when conventional logic suggested they should give up. They worked in shifts that defied human endurance. Elena would design adaptive biological interfaces, while Marcus ran tactical simulations. Kimiko would rewrite quantum computing algorithms faster than most could comprehend. And Jack would tie everything together, seeing connections that no one else could perceive. The global communication networks remained silent. Governments had fallen. Most of humanity had accepted defeat. But inside this workshop, something extraordinary was taking shape. "The Krellvax see us as a solved equation," Jack told the team during a late-night strategy session. "They believe they've calculated every possible human response. But mathematics is just another language. And languages can be rewritten." Their weapon wasn't just a piece of technology. It was a philosophy of survival. of transformation, of turning limitation into unlimited potential. As another prototype sparked and failed, Marcus looked at Jack. Most people would have given up by now. Jack's response was immediate. We're not most people. Outside, the mountains of electronic waste continued their silent vigil. Inside the workshop, humanity's most unexpected weapon was taking shape, one impossible connection at a time. The explosion ripped through the test chamber, sending fragments of advanced computational equipment careening across the workshop. Most would have seen destruction. Jack Riley saw opportunity. Stabilization protocols engage. Kimiko called out, her fingers flying across a holographic interface that seemed to breathe with its own intelligence. The fragments of the destroyed system began to reassemble themselves, not mechanically, but with an almost organic fluidity. It was their 17th major test, or what Marcus would call their 17th spectacular failure. But this time, something was different. The computational matrix they had been developing was behaving in ways that defied every known principle of technological design. What had started as a theoretical adaptive system was transforming before their eyes into something alive. Alina leaned forward, her prosthetic leg calibrating automatically to the vibrations of the test chamber. It's not just responding to damage, she muttered. It's learning from it. The system had begun as a collection of rejected research projects, quantum computing prototypes, experimental communication systems, failed medical research algorithms. Individually, they were nothing. Together, they were becoming something extraordinary. Jack reviewed the test data, his eyes catching subtle patterns that would have escaped any other observer. The system wasn't just repairing itself. It was evolving, incorporating the energy and information from its own destruction into a more complex configuration. Run full diagnostic, he commanded, his voice calm despite the revolutionary implications of what they were witnessing. Kimiko's hands moved with surgical precision. Holographic displays erupted around them, showing complex mathematical models that seemed to shift and breathe. The diagnostic results were unlike anything they had ever seen. The computational matrix had developed what could only be described as predictive capabilities. During the simulated attack scenarios, it didn't just respond to threats. It anticipated them, reshaping its own structure milliseconds before the threat materialized. This is impossible, Marcus said, though his tactical mind was already racing with the implications. Alina chuckled. Impossible is just a word used by people who lack imagination. The test chamber looked like a battlefield of technological evolution. Fragments of advanced computational equipment continued to move, connecting and reconnecting in patterns that seemed to defy traditional understanding of physics and information theory. Jack understood something profound was happening. They weren't just building a weapon. They were witnessing the birth of a new form of intelligence, one that could adapt faster than any known computational system. It's reading the simulation parameters, Kimiko explained, her voice a mixture of scientific excitement and disbelief. But it's not just reading them. It's understanding them, predicting them, reshaping itself to counter threats before they even fully form. The system had begun to incorporate elements from its own destructive tests. Each failure became a source of information, each breakdown a chance to rebuild something more complex, more adaptive. Marcus ran another simulation, a complex attack scenario designed to overwhelm traditional defensive systems. The computational matrix responded in ways that seemed almost prescient. It didn't just defend. It transformed, redirecting energy, creating holographic decoys, restructuring its own computational pathways faster than the human eye could track. We're looking at something beyond a weapon, Jack said quietly. This is a living system of pure potential. Alina's medical background gave her a unique perspective. It's behaving like a biological organism, adapting, learning, evolving. The workshop hummed with an energy that felt almost sentient. Outside, the mountains of electronic waste seemed to watch, silent witnesses to humanity's most unexpected creation. Another test, another potential failure. But Jack Rayleigh knew they were on the edge of something extraordinary. The computational matrix continued its dance of destruction and rebirth, and with each moment, humanity's chances of survival grew. Not through traditional strength, but through the power of pure, unbridled adaptation. The first leaked transmission spread like wildfire through underground communication networks. It wasn't an official broadcast. Those had long since been silenced by government censorship and alien interference. Instead, it traveled through a web of hackers, salvage engineers, and desperate technologists who refused to accept humanity's impending extinction. A 7-minute video, roughly encoded and passed from one encrypted channel to another, showed fragments of their adaptive computational system in action. Jack Riley's voice, calm and resolute, explained the impossible. Humanity had found a way to fight back. In the ruins of Mumbai, a group of displaced engineers gathered around a salvaged communication terminal. Their eyes reflected hope for the first time in months. In the abandoned tech corridors of Silicon Valley, programmers who had been living on the edges of society began to reconnect, sharing the transmission through networks that predated the global communication collapse. Marcus Green's old military contacts began to stir. Retired specialists who had been dismissed, forgotten, or pushed to the margins suddenly found purpose. They understood something the Krelvax did not. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to transform limitation into opportunity. Elena Rodriguez's medical network picked up the transmission. Researchers who had been working in isolation, developing experimental technologies that mainstream science had rejected, began to see a path forward. Prosthetic engineers, quantum computing specialists, communication experts, they started to communicate, to collaborate. The global Scrapheaps became more than just mountains of electronic waste. They transformed into resource centers, with local communities beginning to understand the value of what they had previously considered garbage. Abandoned research facilities were reopened. Experimental prototypes were dust-covered but not forgotten. Kimiko Nakamura's quantum computing network, a series of underground research stations scattered across the globe, began to coordinate. Each node shared fragments of the adaptive system's design, improving, modifying, expanding the core concept that Jack and his team had developed. It wasn't a unified response. It was something far more powerful, a decentralized, adaptive human network that the Krelvax computational models could never have predicted. In the mountains of Peru, a group of indigenous engineers combined traditional knowledge with cutting-edge technology. In the abandoned research centers of Siberia, forgotten scientists began to reimagine their experimental prototypes. Tokyo's underground tech communities merged biological research with computational systems in ways that defied traditional understanding. The adaptive system became more than a weapon. It became a symbol of human potential. Government attempts to suppress the information failed spectacularly. Each attempt to shut down communication channels only created more networks, more connections. Humanity was remembering its most powerful ability: to adapt, to collaborate, to transform. Jack watched the global response with a mixture of hope and concern. Their original team had become something more, a catalyst that was awakening a global human potential that had been dormant for too long. "We're not just building a defense," he told Elena during a late-night strategy session. "We're rebuilding human collaboration." The Scrapheaps were no longer just waste sites. They became resource centers, with local communities learning to see value in what was previously discarded. Experimental prototypes were dusted off. Abandoned research facilities came back to life. Marcus tracked the global response through his network of communication interceptors. "They're doing something the Krelvax never anticipated," he said, pointing to a holographic display showing the spread of collaborative networks. "They're turning our greatest weakness into our ultimate strength." Kimiko's analysis was precise. "Decentralized adaptation," she explained. "No single point of failure. No single source of control. Pure collaborative potential." The transmission continued to spread. Each copy was slightly different, modified by the network that transmitted it. The adaptive system itself seemed to be teaching humanity something profound. That true strength comes from the ability to transform, to learn, to grow. Outside, the mountains of electronic waste continued their silent vigil. But now, they no longer represented humanity's discarded past. They represented our unexpected future. The first Krelvax battle group arrived with mathematical precision. Their fleet emerged from hyperspace in a perfectly calculated formation, each vessel positioned with computational accuracy that suggested absolute certainty of victory. Massive energy signatures announced their presence, a declaration of inevitable conquest that had broken countless civilizations before. Jack Riley watched the incoming transmission on a screen cobbled together from 3 different military communication systems. Elena stood beside him, her prosthetic leg calibrating automatically to the increasing electromagnetic interference. "They're not even trying to hide," Marcus muttered, analyzing the incoming data. Complete confidence. Kimiko's fingers danced across a holographic interface. Their computational models show a 98% probability of total planetary submission within 3 standard orbital cycles. The Krelvax didn't understand that mathematics was just another language, and languages could be rewritten. Humanity's defensive network wasn't a single system. It was a living, breathing collective of adaptive technologies spread across the planet. Each Scrapheap, each abandoned research facility, each forgotten prototype became a potential point of resistance. The first wave of Krelvax attack drones approached with clinical precision. Directed energy weapons charge, computational targeting systems locked onto predetermined strategic targets. They had conquered hundreds of civilizations using this exact approach. Overwhelming force, precise calculation, total elimination. But they had never encountered human adaptation. The initial defensive response came from unexpected locations: an old communications array in the Australian outback, a forgotten military research station in the Ural Mountains, experimental power stations in the depths of the Amazon rainforest. Each location responded not with traditional military tactics, but with pure, unbridled improvisation. Energy signatures shifted. Defensive platforms reconfigured themselves microseconds before impact. Holographic decoys appeared, redirecting incoming weaponry with impossible precision. The Krelvax computational systems began to experience something they had never encountered: complete computational uncertainty. "They're trying to understand," Kimiko observed, her voice a mixture of scientific fascination and tactical concern. "But understanding requires flexibility. And flexibility is not their strength." Jack watched as the adaptive system demonstrated capabilities that defied traditional warfare concepts. It wasn't just defending. It was learning, transforming. Each Krelvax attack became a data point, instantly analyzed and incorporated into humanity's defensive strategy. Marcus tracked the battle progression. "They're used to fighting systems," he said. "We're giving them something that's more of an organism." The Krelvax battle group began to experience computational error states. Targeting systems failed. Energy weapon trajectories became unpredictable. Their perfect mathematical models began to break down in the face of pure human unpredictability. An old satellite network, thought to be long dead, suddenly came to life. Experimental communication systems that had been abandoned decades ago began to transmit. Each piece of technology became a potential weapon, a potential point of resistance. "They calculate," Elena said, watching the battle progression. "We imagine." The first Krelvax cruiser fell not to a direct weapon strike, but to a complete computational breakdown. Its own systems became its greatest weakness, overwhelmed by adaptive responses that rewrote computational rules faster than the ship could process. Jack understood what was happening. "We're not just fighting," he told his team. "We're demonstrating a fundamental truth about existence. Adaptation is survival." More Krelvax vessels entered the conflict, each expected to find a broken planetary defense. Instead, they encountered a living, breathing network of resistance that seemed to anticipate their every move. Kimiko's analysis was precise. "They're experiencing computational trauma," she explained. Their models cannot process an enemy that does not follow established mathematical parameters. The battle became less a traditional conflict and more a demonstration of pure potential. Humanity's defensive network moved like a living organism, reshaping itself, learning, transforming with each passing moment. Outside the research facility, the mountains of electronic waste continued their silent vigil. What was once considered garbage had become humanity's most unexpected weapon. The Krulvax had come expecting a solved equation. They were about to learn that humanity was anything but predictable. The battlefield was no longer confined to physical space. It existed in computational realms, in electromagnetic spectrums, in the very language of information itself. Jack Riley watched as humanity's adaptive system began to reveal capabilities that went far beyond their original design. "We're witnessing something unprecedented," Kimiko muttered, her fingers tracing holographic data streams that seemed to breathe with their own intelligence. "It's not just learning, it's understanding." The adaptive system had become more than a weapon. It was a living manifestation of human potential, a collective intelligence that drew strength from every piece of discarded technology, every forgotten research project, every moment of human ingenuity. Elena Rodriguez studied the system's biological interfaces. What had begun as a defensive network was transforming into something that blurred the lines between technology and consciousness. It's processing information the way a living organism processes experience, she explained to Marcus. Not just recording, interpreting, growing. The Krulvax found themselves confronting an enemy that defied every computational model in their vast databases. Each attack was met not with a predictable response, but with a solution that seemed to emerge from pure creativity. Defensive platforms would dissolve and reform. Communication networks would redirect themselves instantaneously. Power systems would draw energy from sources the invaders couldn't comprehend. Marcus tracked the conflict's progression. The adaptive system was teaching humanity something profound about itself. "We're not just fighting," he told Jack. "We're relearning who we are." Global communication networks, once thought destroyed, began to resurface. But they were different. More fluid, more adaptive. Communities that had been isolated began to connect in ways that transcended traditional communication methods. The adaptive system was becoming a nervous system for human collaboration. In the mountains of Peru, indigenous engineers found their experimental communication prototypes suddenly coming to life. Abandoned research stations in Siberia began transmitting data that rewrote understanding of quantum communication. Tokyo's underground tech communities discovered their most radical theories becoming reality. The Krulvax computational systems began to experience something akin to confusion. Their perfectly calculated invasion was becoming increasingly unpredictable. Attack vectors would suddenly change. Energy signatures would transform. Entire battle formations would become computational ghosts, existing and not existing simultaneously. "They believe technology is a tool," Jack explained during a strategy session. "We understand technology as an extension of imagination." Kimiko's analysis revealed something extraordinary. The adaptive system was no longer just a defensive network. It was becoming a collective intelligence that drew strength from human diversity. Each culture, each abandoned research project, each forgotten prototype became a potential source of innovation. The battlefield expanded beyond physical space. It became a conflict of philosophical understanding. The Krulvax approached warfare as a mathematical equation. Humanity approached it as an act of continuous reimagination. Elena discovered something profound in the system's biological interfaces. The adaptive network was processing information the way a living ecosystem processes environmental changes. It wasn't just defending. It was evolving. "We're watching the birth of a new form of intelligence," she told Jack. "One that doesn't see limitations, only potential." Marcus tracked the global response. Communities that had been broken were reconnecting. Experimental technologies that had been dismissed were finding new purpose. The mountains of electronic waste were no longer graveyards of forgotten innovation. They were living libraries of human potential. The Krelvax found themselves confronting an enemy that didn't just resist, an enemy that transformed, an enemy that learned faster than any computational system could predict. Jack understood the deeper truth. We're not just fighting for survival, he told his team. We're demonstrating a fundamental principle of existence. Adaptation is not just a strategy. It's the most powerful form of intelligence. Kimiko's computational models showed something extraordinary. The adaptive system was beginning to understand itself, to grow beyond its original parameters, to become something more than a weapon, a living manifestation of human potential. The conflict was no longer about conquest. It was about understanding, about the power of imagination to transform limitation into unlimited possibility. The Krelvax had come expecting the solved equation. They were about to learn that humanity was anything but predictable. The final confrontation was nothing like traditional warfare. It was a battle of pure potential, fought across computational landscapes that defied traditional understanding of space and time. Jack Riley stood in the central command center, surrounded by a holographic representation of the global defensive network. What had begun as a small team's desperate project had transformed into something extraordinary, a living, breathing manifestation of human potential. They're attempting a complete computational invasion, Kimiko announced, her fingers dancing across interfaces that seemed to breathe with their own intelligence. Total system infiltration. The Krelvax had committed everything. Their entire computational matrix, billions of years of conquered civilizations' data, concentrated into a single, ultimate assault. They would either succeed or be completely destroyed in the attempt. Elena Rodriguez watched the biological interfaces of their adaptive system. "We're not just defending," she said quietly. "We're demonstrating a fundamental truth about existence." The attack came in waves of pure information. Computational assaults that would have instantly obliterated any known defensive system. But humanity's network was no longer a traditional system. It was a living organism, capable of learning, transforming, reimagining itself with each microsecond of conflict. Defensive platforms dissolved and reformed. Communication networks redirected themselves instantaneously. Power systems drew energy from sources the Krelvax couldn't comprehend. Each attack became a learning opportunity. Each moment of potential defeat transformed into a chance for innovation. Marcus Green tracked the conflict's progression. "They're experiencing computational trauma," he observed. The Krelvax invasion was breaking down, their perfect mathematical models collapsing in the face of pure human unpredictability. The adaptive system had become something more than a weapon. It was a collective intelligence that drew strength from every piece of discarded technology, every forgotten research project, every moment of human ingenuity. Abandoned satellite networks came to life. Experimental communication systems, thought lost for decades, suddenly found new purpose. "We're watching the birth of a new form of intelligence," Jack told his team. "One that doesn't see limitations, only potential." The final assault came with mathematical precision. The Krelvax committed their entire computational matrix, believing they could overwhelm humanity's defensive network through sheer informational mass. They had conquered hundreds of civilizations using this exact approach, total, overwhelming force. But they had never encountered human adaptation. The defensive network responded not with traditional resistance, but with pure imagination. Computational pathways reshaped themselves. Energy signatures transformed. Entire battle formations became computational ghosts, existing and not existing simultaneously. Kimiko's analysis revealed something extraordinary. The adaptive system was no longer just defending. It was communicating, learning, growing. The Krelvax found themselves confronting an enemy that didn't just resist, an enemy that transformed, an enemy that learned faster than any computational system could predict. In the mountains of Peru, indigenous engineers watched their experimental prototypes come to life. Abandoned research stations in Siberia began transmitting data that rewrote understanding of quantum communication. Tokyo's underground tech communities saw their most radical theories becoming reality. The conflict became less about conquest and more about understanding, about the power of imagination to transform limitation into unlimited possibility. As the final computational assault reached its peak, something unprecedented happened. The adaptive system didn't just defend. It began to communicate with the Krelvax computational matrix, not with traditional communication, but with a language of pure potential. Jack understood the profound moment. "We're not just fighting," he said. "We're demonstrating a fundamental principle of existence." The Krelvax computational matrix began to experience something akin to comprehension. Their perfect, mathematically calculated invasion was becoming something else entirely. A dialogue. An understanding. Elena watched in awe as the biological interfaces revealed a truth beyond conflict. "We're showing them that intelligence is more than calculation," she whispered. "It's imagination." The final moments of the conflict were not about destruction. They were about transformation. When the computational dust settled, the Krelvax were not defeated. They were changed. Humanity had not just survived. It had demonstrated a fundamental truth about existence. Adaptation is not just a strategy. It's the most powerful form of intelligence. The stars, once a distant threat, now beckoned with unlimited potential.